So today we continue with chapter 11. Love one neighbors as yourself, as oneself. Let's set it here. Easy to understand, hard to apply topics that we're going to deal here today. We start with faith and charity. Does everybody can see the screen? So Rad is doing the reading for us.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, begin.
Sure.
Okay. Faith and charity. 13. My dear children, not long ago, I told you that charity without faith is not enough to maintain among people a social order capable of making them happy. I should have said that charity is impossible without faith. Actually, you can find generous impulses even among persons without a religion, but that austere charity that is practiced only through self denial, through a continual sacrifice of all selfish interests, can occur only if there is faith to inspire it. For nothing except faith can enable us to bear the cross of this life with courage and perseverance. Yes, my children, it is in vain that, eager for gratification, people dilute themselves about their destiny in this world by
I'm sorry.
Mhm. by pretending that it is permissible for them to concern themselves solely with their own happiness. Of course, God has created us to be happy in eternity. Meanwhile, earthly life ought to be used exclusively for our moral improvement, which is easier to accomplish with the help of the physical organs in the material world. Without taking into account the ordinary ups and downs of life, the diversity of your tastes, your tendencies, and your needs, earthly life is also a way of perfecting yourselves by practicing charity. For it is only through mutual concessions and sacrifices that you can maintain harmony among such diverse elements. You would be correct, however, in stating that people are meant to be happy in this world if they would seek happiness not in material pleasures, but in the good. The history of Christianity tells of martyrs who went joyfully to their deaths. In order to be Christians in your society today, neither death nor martyrdom nor the sacrifice of your life is needed, but only and merely the sacrifice of your selfishness, pride, and vanity. You shall triumphant if charity inspires you and if faith upholds you, a protector spirit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think I have to start from the very beginning. Um, let's try to understand these two words, the concepts of these two words in the light of Spiritism.
Mhm.
Faith is more than just a belief. It's just very often when the word faith is used in Spiritism, it means more of fidelity than belief. Fidelity to whom or to what? Fidelity to something that you believe that transcends the physical, to something that you believe is the governor of our existence, is the provider of everything that we need, and that we call God, that we may represent God in the image of Jesus Christ, since Christ is not God, that's that be clear, but is a representative, is is the governor of the planet that God sent to guide us. So I would like to see faith as more than just belief, because I believe today, tomorrow I don't believe anymore. I believe today, but tomorrow somebody prove me wrong, prove that's wrong, so I move on. But more than the belief, the fidelity, true fidelity to God, true fidelity to Jesus, or to anything else in reality. And charity, if you use the concept taught to us by Jesus, it 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 is three things in one. It is benevolence, and in benevolence we can break it down into two things: assistencialism, which is the giving of alms, is to provide the material needs for a comfortable or a better life for someone else, provide food, shelter. And beneficence is the giving of oneself, that goes beyond the material, that goes beyond the physical. Is to give time, is to give consolation, is to give a hug, is to love someone. That is the benevolence. Then comes the indulgence that you already covered in this chapter. And you see here how Kardec builds things, block by block. Indulgence is an ability of recognize, respect, and be patient with the difficulties of others, with the errors of others, with the vices of others, and forgiveness, which you understand well. So charity is all those things together. Okay, you can't break it apart. Okay. Oh, in charity, I'll do this assistencialism. I give $1 for the guy in the subway. Well, you do the assistencialism. You do one little tiny fraction of charity, but you're far from practicing charity yet. If together with that $1 that you give vibrations of love, you give of empathy. With that, you forgive whatever things those guys done. With that, you indulgent with the guy screaming and smelling bad and demanding that you give him $1 because it look like you can. So you indulgent with all of those difficulties that individual. Then you can say that you practice charity. And furthermore, charity, in one of us in this book also, and it's pretty qualified as the big umbrella that encompasses all the virtues. I think if you are able to be completely benevolent, completely forgiving, and completely indulgent, I think in it you indeed encompasses all the virtues. I think if you are able to do all those two things together at the same time, you are applying all the divine laws that we study in the Spirit's book. When you get there, we'll see. Everything is in there. If you are able to practice charity in this complete form as Jesus teaches us: benevolence, indulgence, and forgiveness. So there's the spirit over here in this practice is something that when I first read, I said no. I totally disagree with that. When it says that I told you that charity without faith is not enough to maintain among people a social order capable of making them happy. I should have said that charity is impossible without faith. I found that extremely strong. I would question if someone who is an agnostic, someone who is a completely atheist, is not capable of practicing charity in its complete form. And I would say that it's very unlikely that someone will reach that level, because even us believers, even us who understand the pathway that leads to our happiness, are not able to practice charity. So it's very unlikely that those that are without faith would be able to do so. But I don't like the word impossible. I think it's a very strong word that is very difficult to be used, that I think when we use, we compromise ourselves big time. Perhaps there are exceptions to the rule, but applying if that's the rule, I would agree, but say that is always exceptions to the rule. And there is that I kind of agree, and I think it could be a rule. Rule is exactly what the spirits say here. Austere charity that is practiced only through self-denial, through a continuous sacrifice of all selfish interest. What would lead someone to practice charity in that sense? To completely eliminate oneself of the equation, to completely have no thoughts of rewards, have no thoughts of getting something back for what we do. Even if you do good, benevolence, indulgence, forgiveness, because we want to go to heaven, because we want to go to Nosso Lar, it's no longer charity. It's a bargain. It's a negotiation. I give you this, you give me that. I do what you tell me to do, and then I go to Nosso Lar. That's no longer charity, right then and there. Again, there is the case of this emperor in the Buddhist world who was a very good king of that nation, benevolent to the people, provide works for everyone, and everyone who worked would have a comfortable life, and those who are struggle for whatever reason, he would provide to them. And was a devoted of one Buddhist master that he wished to become a disciple of that master. And we know that in Buddhist tradition, it's very difficult for one to be labeled as a disciple of one or another master. They are very picky, very selective. And this king seek to become that disciple. And when we thought he was ready after trial a few other times, he goes to the master and say, do you see what I do for the people? Do you see the happiness that I bring to the people? What does it get me? And the master said, nothing. And he said, wait a minute. I do all of this for them. I bring them happiness and I get nothing reward. And he said, no. If you do that with the expectancy of a reward, then you get nothing. And that's why he could not be accepted as one of the disciples of that master. He had not understood the definition of charity yet. He was providing assistencialism. He was very good, he was generous, way above average, way above us, but yet had not understood completely the concept of giving without expectancy. And if you look in our recent history, the cases that we know of people that we may call charitable, one common denominator, all of them was especially this faith of to something much, much greater. You may use the case, you may use Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Martin Luther King, Francisco Cândido Xavier. And the common denominator is that the cause was much greater than themselves, always. Everything that is done, that entire life, was for something much greater than themselves. That they make themselves so minute in perspective of the cause of what they wanted to achieve. One cannot do that without faith. Faith that it becomes extremely important for us to not only take ourselves out of that equation, but to endure all the sacrifice that comes along with this goal of being completely charitable. And another common denominator of all of those is that all of them have to endure tremendous amount of sacrifices and pain that most of us could not tolerate. Most of us would give up along the way because it was too much. Because most of us lack the faith that those illuminators that I just named here have. Those are the true illuminators. And again, I'd like to differentiate the those three individuals. The ignorance are us, who just live for ourselves, don't care. And then you have the revolutionaries, was the ones who understand that a cause is more important than themselves, and they want to do something about it, but they have no idea how. And the illuminators are the ones who recognize the need to work, put the effort in the work, and know what to do. Those are the illuminators. We could use the case for all the ones that I have said here already. Once you place yourself in a position of an illuminator, you will face hardships that most of us would not be able to handle. And there is a passage in the Emmanuel, one of Emmanuel's books, I don't remember exactly here, that he makes a comparison of faith with a lamp. He says that a faith without charity is like a lamp without energy. It's there, you can see, you can feel it, but it's unproductive, it does nothing. You have all the faith in this world, but if that faith does not produce anything, it is good for nothing. What we say here, all the knowledge, the guys go to school, he gets 6, 7, 8 degrees, PhD, 8, 7, but never worked in his life. He is a perpetual student. A genius, has PhD in 8, 9 different disciplines, but never worked one day in his or her life. What is the good of all that knowledge? What is the good of all those PhDs, diplomas hanging on the wall? Basically, in reality, it's good for nothing. Because what really matters is work, is the expenditure, expense of energy produces something good for oneself or for others. The definition of work in our spirit's book, right? Faith is the same thing. You may have all the faith in this word, but if you don't apply it, it's just good. It's just as good as a diploma hanging on somebody's wall. So you better off have one degree, one diploma, or none at all, but be productive. Then have all these things that you can show off and by be completely unproductive. It's likely to be unlikely to happen because I think once you develop true faith, you commit yourself to the work. And then he continues talking about, are we here then just to suffer? Are we here then just to not exist, but just look at others? And the Spirit is telling us, no, you understand that you have your needs. You understand that you have even your passions and your desires. And what you are here for is exactly to overcome those tendencies, those passions, those desires. That is the importance of reincarnation, a trial, in a planet of trial and expiations. It is here that we learn to develop the ability to practice charity. It is here that little step, baby step by baby steps, the concept of charity will be a natural thing within us. Right now, we do a little bit of assistantialism, but you have to think about it. Right now, we put a little effort and go beyond assistantialism and have empathy. And now we give $1, but with that dollar, we say, a good morning. I hope you have a better day today. Hope things go well for you. Not only give that dollar and run away as fast as possible. We give a little bit of ourselves, but with effort. One day it's going to be a natural thing happening to us. One day we'll be able to see the difficulties of others with indulgence and not with the judgmental and not with a sense of superiority. You see how bad I am? I'm a spiritist now, right? And we'll learn that here in this planet of trials and expiations. This is not a vacation resort. It's a place of work, it's a place of learning. And that's why we gained up the strength to free ourselves of those great enemies that we have, those great enemies of charity with selfishness, pride, and vanity. It is completely incomparable. It's water and oil, charity, and these three things. If you have one of them, then we're not able to practice charity yet. And that's why the Spirit says that he thinks it's impossible to practice charity without faith. I would say that will be the rule, but there is always exceptions to the rule. Okay, comments?
I must say, Elmo, it's beautiful what you just explained, but gee, it's so difficult because I see what you're explaining is, you go and you give your dollar, and then you turn around and you have no patience with somebody who's disturbed your day.
That's
And
right.
it's you know s- then to forgive others, and it's so difficult. I hear what you're saying, and I understand it. I think this is why we come back, right? I mean, it's gonna take time. Yeah, because I feel sometimes, okay, I did this, I did that, then boom, you just explained it so clearly. I says, oh my God, no, I don't think I did. No, not yet. No, you have a whole way to go.
No, especially when it comes to the indulgence, it's so
Oh my
hard to be
goodness,
indulgent. My
that
goodness.
that is very difficult, to recognize, to respect, to understand that other person. Gee whiz. But this is what we're here for. And we have to work hard at it each and every day.
And there you see the absolute love of God and the perfection of God and God's laws to give us this continuous opportunity to transform ourselves at our own pace. As much as we can do by ourselves with our own effort, by ourselves, because we need to do it. We have assistance all the time. There's always someone there to assist us. In order to learn, we need to learn from someone else. We cannot learn from ourselves. But the benevolence, the perfect love of God is so immense that you will do according to one free will. You will get there at your own pace, but you'll get there.
Okay. I gotta keep telling myself that every day. We'll get there, and like we always say, the baby steps.
Yeah.
We will get there. It's gonna
Yeah.
take many reincarnations.
This week in our Gasp at Home, we had the passage of the that mother that takes the daughter to for the price of charity in the part of this book. Do not let your left hand knows what your right hand is doing. And everybody knows that passage on the gospel, right? The mother who takes the daughter and bring her to help the poor and teach the mother what is and teach the child what true charity is, that it's more than give the alms, but it's to give something of oneself. And that's perhaps the most pretty part of the book. It's a
It's
wonderful
beautiful.
thing.
And isn't that the same passage is the one that someone comes and knocks at her door? Is it the same one?
That's
And
correct. Someone
right?
some
And she says,
someone that she
"Okay,
usually helps knocks at the door,
yes,
and she says, "Tell no one."
go to right."
Right. So, and that is the meaning of do not let your left hand knows what your right hand is doing. That she's a lady of the society, and in her society, she behaves like a lady of the society. But when she goes to help the poor, she dresses like the poor, she dresses like one of them, as not to give a sense of superiority. And it's such a beautiful passage.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
So after reading that, in my comments was, we have Jesus as the model and guide. That's the example that you have to follow.
Yeah.
But that is so far away that it's truth is right now impossible, to follow Jesus as step by step. But then we go down, we have St. Francis of Assisi. That's still too far away, my goodness. And then we have, I don't know, Gandhi. And then you have Mother Teresa. And then you have Franciscan Xavier. It's still too far away. Until you, and then we have this lady
Yeah.
Israel so far away also.
Mhm.
So no, if you see Jesus so far out that we can even conceive the probability of imitating him, perhaps you use this lady and try to imitate her. And if that seems to be such a difficult struggle for us right now, but we need to have those examples, and you
Yeah.
have to have the faith, and that faith not only in the divinity that is there for us, but in ourselves.
Mhm.
If we are created the image of God, and that is the meaning of the give to God, give to Caesar what Caesar, and give to God
Yeah.
what is God. Because if in that coin there is the image of Caesar, therefore you give to Caesar, we are the image of God. We have the image of God. So we give ourselves to God. To have this faith, to have this belief, is what will guide us to eventually be able to practice charity. For now, we fake it. For now, we do a little bit of assistencialism. For now, we look at that woman and say, going to be just like her, and I starting today. And comes tonight and say, I dropped the ball. So tomorrow, I'll try again.
Yes.
And tomorrow, I'll try again. And every night, say, I dropped the ball again and again and again. Until eventually, a few incarnations ahead, to say, yeah, I got it now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there will be further challenges ahead because that woman, she's not looking down and look how and have pity on us. She's look far ahead and say, that is the objective that I want to reach, someone that is even better than her. And that's what we have to do. For now, let's inspire ourselves on that woman. Let's see if that, at least for half of a day, you can be some like her.
Every day. Okay, that sounds good. Sounds reasonable. Sounds good. No, we'll continue. No.
Yeah.
Okay, good. So now we're at 14 is charity toward criminals.
That's a good one too, huh?
Yeah, that's okay. True charity is one of the most sublime teachings that God has given to the world. Complete fraternity ought to exist among the true disciples of his doctrine. You must love unfortunates and criminals as God's creatures, to whom forgiveness and mercy will be granted if they repent, as is the case with the wrong, as is the case with you for the wrongs that you commit against his law. Regard yourselves as more reprehensible and guilty than those. Okay, I lost it. Okay,
Where am I?
okay,
Where are you?
I lost it. No. Okay, while giving complete fraternity ought to exist among true disciples of his platform. You must love unfortunates and criminals as God's creatures, to whom forgiveness and mercy will be granted if they repent, as is the case with you for the wrongs that you commit against his law. Regard yourselves as more reprehensible and guilty than those to whom you refuse forgiveness and commiseration, because quite often they do not know God as you do, and less will be asked of them than of you. Do not judge, oh, do not judge, my dear friends, for the judgment you render will be more severely applied to you, and you have need of indulgence for the sins you continuously commit. Do you not know that there are many acts that are crimes in the eyes of God of purity, but which the world does not even regard as light offenses? True charity does not exist only in alms you give or even in the consoling words that might accompany them. No, this is not what God demands of you. The sublime charity toward by Jesus also consists in the benevolence always granted in all things toward your neighbor. You can even exercise this sublime virtue on many individuals who do not need alms, but who words of love, consolation, and encouragement will lead to the Lord. I will say once more, that the times are near when widespread fraternity will reign on this globe. The law of Christ is what will govern humans, and that law alone will be the restraint and hope that will lead souls to the blessed realms. Thus, love one another as children of the same Father. Do not set up differences between you and those who are unfortunate, for God wills for everyone to be equal. Therefore, despise no one. God allows great criminals to dwell amongst you to serve you as a lesson. Soon, when humans have been led to the true laws of God, such lessons will no longer be needed, and all impure and rebellious spirits will be relegated to lower worlds according to their inclinations. You owe to those of whom I speak the help of your prayers. That is true charity. You do not have to say of criminals, they are wrenched, they must be expunged from the earth. The death that is inflicted on them is too kind for that type of individual. No, you must not speak like that. Look at your model, Jesus. What would he say if he saw such unfortunate persons next to him? He would He would grieve for them. He would regard them as truly needy, sick persons, and would extend his hands to them. You cannot do this in reality, but you can at least pray for them and assist their spirits in the few moments they must yet spend on your earth. Repentance may touch their hearts if you pray with faith. They are your neighbors, just as the best individuals are, like yours. Their wandering and rebellious souls were created to become perfect. So help them out of their quagmire and pray for them. Elizabeth de France.
Well, talking about challenges, what about this one?
Yes, great challenge. Yes.
Who are criminals?
Oh, God.
One time, Francis Cândido Xavier was walking in a prison, you know, in the hallway with cells on the both sides full of prisoners. And Chico asked Emmanuel, spirit who was there with him, he asked, Emmanuel, who are these people? And Emmanuel answered, those are all of us who got caught. So in reality, what Emmanuel says that all of us are criminals, all of us are in debt with the law. Those in prisons got caught. We didn't. According to the human law.
Mhm.
But let's take it beyond the human law, the law of the land, and let's take it one step up with the more divine law. Who could say that it's free of committing any crime? And if we choose to call ourselves Christians, if we choose to follow Christ, when Christ says, love everyone, love your enemies, it means everyone. It doesn't select a group to be loved and a group to be hated and a group to be neglected. It's to love everyone. And in that everyone, the criminals are also involved. It's very easy to point fingers and accuse and demand a harsh justice, harsh punishment when it's far away from us. Um, I don't like the drug dealers. I think they are filthy. They are a disgrace for society. Until I find out that my daughter herself is selling drugs and got caught. How much punishment I want for that one? That is it. That is my love. Do I want
Mm.
the law to be implacable, to be harsh? As I also say, for the others are far away from me.
Mm.
As for the one that is now close, they're the ones that is the one that I love. Now do I understand that perhaps the justice could be more lenient.
Mm.
Perhaps the just could be more forgiving. That perhaps the justice could be more instructive than punitive. Do I believe in special treatment for ones and not for another? Is when things hit us in our home, in our heart, that we start to reflect about the others, about the ones that we call criminals. Those criminals also have mothers and fathers, sons and daughters. They are also loved by someone.
You know what I think of, Elmo?
Mm-hmm.
I think of so many of them that are in prison, that they're going through this and actually innocent of whatever crime they accuse them of, innocent of that crime, and they're in there uh, taking the time of what they give them. So, what do you say with that? Many are unfairly prisoned, and but I'm sure because of what we learn here that there are reasons for that. Is that not so? That's hard to take.
And that again is who are the criminals.
Mm, yeah.
Okay. If if our system, if our legal system have room to have someone in position of making justice according to the law of the land, and that someone places an innocent man in prison, who is the criminal here? Who committed a crime here?
Yeah.
That's why Emmanuel says, criminal, the ones who got caught. I'm sorry, the ones in prison are the ones who got caught. Maybe that person who act in a simple act of ignorance, or perhaps in an act of discrimination, perhaps an act of getting some reward for this, places an innocent man incarceration. That person in a position of power is perhaps the greatest of the criminals, much more of a criminal than those who are in prisons right now.
Yes. Absolutely. Mm,
But when Jesus says, love all,
mm,
include those who commit those kind of crimes, include those who are in a position of power and misuse the position of power. Those perhaps the worst criminals, and we must love them as well.
right.
You must love charity to those as well, because they are part of all.
Mm,
They are
mm,
not excluded.
absolutely.
What we just mentioned reflects us, we, the society, members of the society, reflects who we are. as a community, as a society. It reflects all the hardship that you have to endure, to correct, to improve this criminal justice, this judicial, this legal system, to make it get closer and closer to the divine laws. We are imperfect, we create imperfect laws. We are full of vices, and all those vices are reflected not on, perhaps not even in our laws, but how we interpret and how we use those laws. And if we are under those individuals in positions of power, because that's what we deserve right now, we have the leaders that we deserve, basically. We choose our leaders to begin with. So it's a reflection of us. And it's each one of us doing our part to improve ourselves that we will improve the whole, that we better the community. Once I better myself, I better, not according to Gandhi. Once I better myself, I better my family, my household. When I improve my household, I improve my neighborhood. When I improve my neighborhood, I improve my town. When I improve my town, I improve the world. But it starts with me, make my self-improvement. So there's a lot of injustices out there. There's a lot of crimes being committed. And for individuals, you never spend a day in a prison, but they are not going to get away with it because there is a law above ours that is perfect, that is divine, and no one escaped that one. And that law is not punitive. That law is instructive. That law is meant to move us up towards progress. And very, very often, the steps that we need to move up that towards progress require some difficult, perhaps painful, entire reincarnations. Someone in the abuse the power, who commit those kind of crimes of putting innocent people behind bars, we would imagine that we would have to face some really challenge reincarnations, expiations ahead. Not as a punishment, but as an instrument of teaching, is an instrument for that person to learn to follow the divine laws, and all of us in that. So if you bring down the criminals, as we call labor criminals here, the ones who have broken the law, committed crimes here, to love them is a challenge. To have charge towards them is a challenge. But if you choose to to practice charity, give us assistencialism is not enough. And that comes the most hard part, the indulgence. To be understand their difficulties, to have empathy towards them. Chico Xavier used to go to prison and used to bring to them common vulgar magazines. Have to bring to them cigarettes, and he was censored. How can you do that? No, these people that you bring cigarettes, you bring common magazines to them. Why don't you bring them the gospel? Why didn't you bring them the Spirit's book? And the answer was, they did not ask me for the Spirit's book. They did not ask me for the gospel. They asked me for cigarettes and magazines. That's what they want. That's what they need right now. To bring What I want to them
Mm.
is a charge towards myself, not to them. To bring cigarettes to them, perhaps they will allow me to sit down with them and have a conversation for 5 minutes. That is much more than they ever gonna do with that spirit's book. They ain't gonna even open that spirit's book. They're gonna burn it. They're gonna take out the pages and smoke it if you don't have cigarettes.
Right. They're not ready. No.
To understand the grandiosity of this man, to understand that each one of us has a time and love them, that is indulgence right then and there.
Exactly.
They didn't ask me for the gospel. They asked me for cigarettes. That's what they want. For now, I give them a cigarette. I'll sit 5 minutes with them. Perhaps I come back there the next time. They will ask me for a gospel. Then I'll be happy to give him a gospel. That's indulgence. That's wisdom. That's really taking yourself out of the equation, because as the spiritist, we have to give the spirit's book to everyone. Well, did anybody ask for it? Or you want to give a gift to yourself, say how great you are, that you are spreading the doctrine.
Right. Yeah.
And comes again, to the question of judgment. Do not judge. Oh, do not judge, my dear friends, for the judgment you render will be most severely applied to you, and you have need of indulgence for the sins you continually commit.
Mm.
Do you not know that there are many acts that are crimes in the eyes of the God of purity, but which the world does not even regard as light offenses? And that got the thing that we are all criminals. How can I judge others? How much do you know about others' life? Perhaps the one that we are judging and criticizing and repelling is make a lot more progress in this reincarnation than we are. We don't know where that person's coming from. We don't know where we are coming from. Maybe that person in a scale, let's say, of perfectibility that goes from 0 to 100, and the guy started their reincarnation at 2 and moved forth to 7. Well, he moved 5 steps. And perhaps we start at 20 and we move 20.5. So that person's make a lot more progress than we are. And we are not in the position of criticize because we don't know. We don't have the ability to look that person, know what is that person, where that person's come from. You don't know even the difficulty and challenge that person have gone through in this incarnation alone, not even considering past lives. Someone who is committing crimes in accordance to the law must be taken away from society to maintain order, to maintain discipline. Those who do not respect the laws must be taken away. That's obvious. As a protection to the community, as a protection to him or herself, to prevent him or herself to get into even greater debit with both laws, the human and the divine laws. A criminal, a potential criminal, when taken away from society, in reality, we are protecting that individual from committing higher, more difficult crimes that will require more difficult expiations. But we do that to protect, to indulgence that individual, not to punish that individual. Punishment, him or her will do it herself to themselves because our conscience will not let us escape. We can escape everyone and everything, but not our conscience. And one day, those dividing laws imprinted on our conscience will be knocking, 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 knocking so hard that you beg for the opportunity to repair, that you beg the opportunity to expiate all those things. We make mistakes that some of them are repairable, can repair here, right in this existence. Some of them we can't. There are some defects then in your computer that perhaps you can fix. Some you cannot. You're gonna have to live with the broken computer. If it does not work, you're gonna have to get another one. In our lives the same way. Some mistakes that we make, we can fix, repair, everything's okay, move on. Some of them we'll have to carry on to the entire rest of this reincarnation until we get a new one, the next one. In that next reincarnation, perhaps we can expiate, we can, repair what we have done. And it's all of us. And it's all of us committing the crimes in accordance with the law of the land. But more important, committed the crimes that are of divine nature. That even may be okay with the law of the land. That even may be okay for someone who has less understand, perhaps us, but would not be okay with someone with a great degree of understanding. And then comes the thing, the more you know, the more you're responsible. The more you have, the more you'll be asked from you. And one thing that will be asked from us is, where was your indulgence? Where was your ability to forgive that criminal, that guy who broke the window of your car to steal the stereo system and sold outside for $5 in exchange for a rock of crack? Can you forgive that guy? I can be indulgent with that guy. Perhaps you'll be asked those questions later on. Where was indulgence then? Where was your ability to be forgiven then? Where was your ability to follow Christ then?
You know, there was a few times you see in the news of mothers who have lost their children killed. And I remember one or two of them that have said, they forgave. And what took it more to the heart was that mother had said, we will never know what that person, uh, was going through and took my son. So she was actually forgiving the person and having indulgence and understanding. That, if anything, is what you're just explaining. You know, to take a son or person that you love, they take them in this way as killed, and the mother says, "Could you imagine what that person was going through that had to take my son?" I mean, that, if anything, is exactly what we are explaining here.
Yes, and we have difficulty to forgive the guy who breaks into our car to steal a stereo system, right? Um, I remember when there was this the horrible crime in Connecticut with all the children, the guy
Yes.
who killed all the children in the school,
The school.
right? In the school.
Oh,
And how many parents come forward and say they forgive that person, they truly forgive that person, you know. To me, one of the greatest lesson that I have learned
wow.
in a long time. I mean, not one or two parents, but a group of parents came in and they totally forgive that person.
Yes.
The they understand that we are all equal is a very hard thing for us to grasp.
Mhm.
I mean, am I equal to the guy who is going to a school full of children and shooting them?
Mhm.
Likely not on that aspect. I like to believe that all of us here would not act in such a way anymore. But we commit our own crimes. And again, what is that person coming from? What is in the mind of that person? What kind of obsessors are, you know, co-responsible with the actions of that criminal? What are those how much of those obsessors are really commanding that guy in such a hard obsession? Not that he's less responsible, he's equally responsible, and that they can share responsibility. We
Mhm.
don't know. It's
Totally.
so many things that we don't know, and that's because there is that we cannot judge. Yes, we must take them out of society to protect society and to protect themselves. And when they are taken away, they should be given all the opportunities to understand, to learn why that's such a difficult act. And one day, hopefully, in our society, when those guys will be taken to prisons or whatever like this, they may even go to this obsession session um, with spiritists who are there to help those criminals to free themselves of those obsessors.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, any more comments here?
Yesterday on the lecture by Marco Magalhães on the USSF, which is a very good lecture, and I highly recommend that those that missed to
Mhm.
watch it. It's on the pathogenesis of diseases
Oh
in
yeah, I have to say that.
the
Uh,
physical and spiritual. He was. It's not related to criminals, but it's more or less the same thing that you were talking about children, right? He said that parents that lost their children to diseases, young children, and used this the disease to help others to work in movements and things like that to fight the disease or to foundations and things like that have a much healthier life and uh, and much live better than those that wallow in suffering because everybody suffers with this. It's this is these tragedies that we can't you can't relate if you haven't gone through, but the reaction to it is what really makes the difference for each one of us, right? Because that's the natural reaction is just to wallow in misery, and that's only going to cause us more harm than good, right?
That's right. So what those individuals developed is a cause, is a target, something that they aim at, and then they put the energy, the effort towards that target, towards that cause. And that's what we started talking in the beginning and have that fidelity. Now they created that fidelity to that thing which brings the reward that it cannot be measured. Every time that they conquer a little bit, is the degree of happiness is immense for those individuals. And the same goes for parents who lost children to crimes like that. Like in that case in Connecticut, those parents get together and then they have some changes in laws, or they went into Washington, and some laws have changed because of that, because they act. Okay, let's continue.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, we're at 15. Should one risk one's own life for a criminal? A man is in danger of death. In order to save him, one must risk one's own life. However, it is known that he is a criminal and that if he escapes death, he will be able to commit more crimes. In spite of this fact, should one risk one's life to save him? This is a very serious question, one that a spirit not could face. I will respond in accordance with my moral advancement, since the issue is whether or not one should risk one's life for a criminal. Devotion is blind. One lends aid to an enemy. Therefore, one must also lend aid to an enemy of society, a criminal, in other words. Do you think that you will only tear this criminal away from death? Perhaps it will be from his entire past life. Consider the possibility that in those quick instants that drag the final minutes of life from him, this lost man returns to his past life, or rather, his past life arises before him. Death, perhaps, is coming too soon for him. Reincarnation could be terrible. So rush to his aid. You, whom the Spiritist science has enlightened, rush to him and snatch him from his condemnation. And then perhaps the person who would have died cursing you instead throw himself into your arms. You should not ask yourselves, however, if he is going to do so or not. Just go to his aid, because in saving him, you obey that voice of the heart that tells you you can save him, so save him. Laminius.
That's another
Another one, yes.
challenge for us there, right? Today is the day of challenges. But if you're going to help those in need, as Christ suggests, you're going to help those in need, regardless. Who's in greater need of staying a little longer in the planet of trial and expiation? Who is in greater need of staying in this kind of prison that is this reincarnation? The righteous, the righteous, or the one who is in the wrong path? For the righteous, for the one who's in the right path, this incarnation is a moment of happiness. Is a moment of living behind the limitations of this physical instrument that limits our potential so much, and go back to the spiritual world and say, "Oh, done my work, done my part, I'm done, I'm so happy." Where would that criminal go if that criminal discarnates? What if this criminal discarnates very early, continue with the same state of mind? Perhaps it would be even more dangerous as a discarnate spirit than an incarnate spirit. What else? Who can tell if that person whose life was saved at that moment will grasp a greater understanding of the meaning of life, of the meaning of responsibility, of the meaning that 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 person has value because someone risked their own life to save that person, or perhaps someone even lost his or her life to save the life of that person. Perhaps that's what will be the point of ignition for the transformation of that person into a criminal, to someone who will spend the rest of their life trying to repair their mistakes. For the one who's doing good, who's doing right, even if they discard it in that moment, they'll say, I did the right thing. I act in accordance to the teachings of Christ. I have nothing to regret. I done what was right. And we will enjoy perhaps a much better part of our lives without the physical body than one with the physical body. But that one, that criminal, perhaps is the one who needs to stay here. You know, the school is for the ignorant. The hospital is for the sick. We being here now, we are in a hospital. We are in this prison because that's where we need. That's what we need. And perhaps those who are in the life of crime needs it more than those who are in the pathway of goodness. But I don't think no one will be condemned if the one choose not to risk their own lives to save a life of someone who is in the wrong pathway. You will act in accordance to our conscience, and we're gonna have to deal with our decisions with our conscience.
Absolutely. Mhm.
If we think it's in a military system, in the military hierarchy, say a general is more important than a soldier, and the soldier will risk his or her life to protect the general because the general is in that higher hierarchy in a better position. Because that general is more capable of doing more good to the general military system than that soldier. The same thing here. If we are in a position of if you're in a position of help someone, you should help someone. The opposite is true, that our need to stay here is lesser of someone who is the wrong pathway. That person needs it more than we do. So if you have this concept of this understand, would be easy to go for the assistance of someone that is labeled as a criminal. Okay, comments, questions? So we step on the chapter now.
We finished. Love your enemies. Okay. Render good for evil. You have learned that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemies. But I say to you, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who persecute and malign you, so that you may be children of your Father who's in heaven, who makes the sun rise on the good and on the evil, and the rain fall on the just and the unjust. For if you love only those who love you, what reward will you receive from it? Do not the publicans also do that? And if you greet only your brothers, what are you doing that others do not? Do not the publicans do the same? I say to you that if your justice is not more abundant than that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Matthews.
I'm sorry.
Okay. If you love only those who love you, what reward will you have, since even sinners also love those who love them? And if you do good only to those who do good to you, what reward will you have, since even sinners do the same thing? And if you lend only to those from whom you can expect the same favor, what reward will you have, since even sinners lend to each another in order to receive the same advantage? But as for you, love your enemies, do good to all, and lend without expecting anything. And then your reward will be very great, and you will be children of the Most High, who is good to the ingrates and even the wicked. Thus, be full of mercy, just as your Father is full of mercy. Luke. If love toward one's neighbor is the principle of charity, loving one's enemies is its sublime application, for such a virtue is one of the greatest victories attainable over selfishness and pride. However, there is usually a misunderstanding as to the meaning of the word love in this context. Jesus did not mean by these words that one must have one for one's enemy, the tenderness that one would have for a brother, a sister, or a friend. Love supposes trust, and we could not trust someone who we know means us harm. We could not have the same infusion of friendship with such a person, knowing that he or she is capable of abusing it. Among persons who distrust one another, the bonds of affinity cannot be the same as those that exist among those who are in communion of thought. Finally, one cannot feel the same pleasure upon meeting an enemy that one feels upon meeting a friend. Furthermore, this sentiment results from a physical law, the law, the law of assimilation and repulsion of fluids. A malevolent thought emits a fluidic current whose impression is painful. A benevolent thought envelopes you in a pleasant emanation. Hence, the difference in sensations one receives when close to a friend or an enemy. To love one's enemies, therefore, cannot mean that one should not make a difference between them and one's friends. This precept seems difficult, even impossible to practice, only because people have wrongly believed that it prescribes giving friends and enemies the same place in their hearts. Since the poverty of the human language forces us to use the same term to express the various nuances of sentiments, reason calls us to differentiate them according to each case. To love one's enemies, therefore, does not mean holding for them an affection that is not natural, since contact with an enemy makes the heart beat in a much different way than does contact with a friend. It means holding neither hatred, rancor, nor desires for vengeance against them. It means forgiving them unconditionally and without ulterior motives for the evil they have caused us. It means not setting up any obstacles to reconciliation. It means wanting the good for them instead of wishing them evil. It means rejoicing instead of despairing for the good that reaches them. It means abstaining either in word or in act from anything that might harm them. Finally, it means repaying their evil with good and everything with no intention of humiliating them. Whoever does this fulfills the conditions of the commandment, love your enemies. Loving one's enemies.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay.
It's enough for us to stop here. The very first page of this book, there is the sentence, unshakable faith is only the kind that can stand face. sorry, unshakable faith is only the kind that can stand face to face with reason in all human epochs. And this passage is everything that Kardec means by the reasoning over there. It takes into perspective the teachings of Christ in a very reasonable, sensible way. Yes, love your enemies. Love all equally. Because it's very easy, there is no challenge to love those who look like us, who think like us, who share the same blood that we share, who has the same skin color that we have. It's no challenge whatsoever in that. The true challenge is to love those who doesn't look like us, who doesn't think like us, who have different ideologies than us, who thinks that things should move in one direction and things and those who thinks that things should move in a different direction. The challenge to love enemies, is the challenge of the issues of indulgence that you just covered here. Especially in these times of division, it seems that all of us are walking farther and farther and farther away from the center where we should meet and discuss our differences. We are all moving so far right and so far left that there is no way that we could sit and discuss our differences for the common good. When we say that to take the way of the middle is not take the way of the middle in a straight line, it's to take the way of the middle at a higher level. As if you look at one triangle of three sides are equal, to meet in the middle is the apex of the triangle, is the top of the triangle, which in the middle, but it's above the sides. And that's why we will love our enemies. And with reasoning, the problem of the word love, especially on languages with a very small lexicon, have very few words, that one word have multiple meanings, and the interpretation that the word is vary in the context of putting everything together. The word love in Aramaic have very different meanings. The word love would be the thing do not hate, do not despise, to help your enemies, not to love your enemies as you love your spouse, as you love your children, as you love your friends, but do not hate your enemies, do not despise your enemies, do not waste an opportunity to help your enemies. Of course, not love the same way that you'd love, again, your parents, your spouses, because there is even, and the Spirit put here very clear to us, there is even a physical, in terms of energy incompatibility, that makes it difficult for us to have the same kind of interaction with someone that is our friends than someone who is our enemies. And then the word enemies is a more complicated one. Who is our enemies? Who do I consider? What do I do in my life to have enemies? Would you say in this horrible context that we live in American society today that Democrats and Republicans are enemies? What a horrible thing to say, right? That because we have different political ideologies, we are now enemies. Who are the enemies? What am I doing with my life that I'm creating enemies? Does, let's say, someone like Devout Pereira Frank have enemies? Sure he does. Have Devout Pereira Frank have done anything to create animosity towards him? Hardly so. I can't believe it. I don't know him so well, but I can imagine that he's had done something to offend others. But in his pathway, in his work, for do what he does, there are individuals who will see him as an enemy, but him does not see those individuals as his enemy. So even the word enemy over here, we have to be very careful with.
Yeah.
Who is my enemy? Who is your enemy? Who sees me as an enemy and why? Because to do the work that Devout Pereira Frank does, certainly there are many who rejects his word and see him as an enemy.
Mm.
But I go on my own here, and if I'm wrong, but I doubt that I'm wrong, that he does not see those individuals as an enemy. Much on the contrary, I'm sure you'd have tremendous amount of compassion towards those individuals who sees him as an enemy. So to start with, we have to say, do I have enemy? Do I have individuals that I see as an enemy? And why? Is it a question of ideology? Is it a question that I like big government and the other side like small government? I like lots of regulations and the other guy likes as minimal regulation as possible. Does it make us enemies? Should we get together in the center, which not parallel to the ground, but it's up high? That's where we meet and discuss our differences. And when you do that, and we see that we are so much more alike than we ever thought. And when we meet there at the center, not at the ground level, but above, then we love our enemies. Then we can deal with our differences. Then perhaps I'm not going to invite him or her for dinner in my home, but we will shake hands with discipline, with civility, and I will hear him or her, and she or him will hear, and perhaps we can make things better by doing so. The only way that we can progress, that a community can progress, is if we put our differences together for the benefit of all. And that's why our differences are important. That's why those who want no regulation whatsoever, those who want 100% of all regulations, they are both on going far, but when they meet in the center, they'll see the regulations that are necessary and the ones that are not necessary, and then they get in accord and make things better for everyone. So there is a need to love our enemies. Doesn't mean that we're gonna kiss them the same way that we kiss our spouses and our fathers and mothers, but you have the respect to them. Will you look to encounter, you look to look in their eyes, you look the opportunity to hear what they have to say. And then everybody profits from it. So to love your enemy means to not go distant from your enemy, approximate to your enemies, hear your enemies, have compassion to your enemies. And that is extremely reasonable, and that's why I really love this doctrine. And this is exactly what we need today in our lives. You need to stop moving far lateral to the far right, to the far left, and meet in the center, but not on the ground, higher up on the top of the pyramid. There we love our enemies. Comments? I think we come to an end.
Okay, do number 4.
No, 12:30 we stop, right?
Oh, yeah, right. Okay.
No one has, we're now 4 minutes. No one has a comment. We can make our final prayers.
Just a reminder that we reopen our center tomorrow. On Mondays only, same format as previous, 6 to 7 fraternal assistance. Then from 7 to 7:30, a quick reading of a book, and then a prayer and passes, and that's it. Okay, we will continue with the online virtual meeting at 7:30 for those that cannot go or prefer to stay home, and the rest of our regular scheduled meetings online continues as usual, the virtual meetings. Okay.
Excuse me, what are passes?
What are passes? Okay.
Okay.
Elmo.
You know, have you heard of laying of hands? Maryland? Have you heard of laying of hands? Oh, she's mute.
She's muting. Yeah, she's muting.
Yeah. So passes is the infusion, the transfusion, so to say, of energy from one to another. In the laying of hands is usually from a incarnate to another incarnate, from one person to another person by the laying of hands. Passes is somewhat similar, in which there is a transfusion of energies that is primarily come from the benevolent spirits of that center, of that house, in association with the energies of the ones providing the passes. So let's say that I sit on a chair and João will give me passes. He will concentrate, he will donate whatever he has to give me, but he will serve as an instrument. So spirits, doctors, all kinds of spirits can pass the energies to me through the hands of João, giving to me what I need. So it's basically an infusion of energies, a transfusion of energies that come from our spiritual friends, the responsible one of the Spiritism Center, in association with the little bit that the path giver also has to offer. It can be used as a treatment. It can be used as just a harmonizing of the flow of energies in our physical, in our spiritual bodies.
Thank you so much.
Sure. Okay, a volunteer for the final prayers.
I will. Carol
Thank
here.
you. Thank
Sure.
you, Carol.
Thank you very much, Elmo. Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Mm.
Infinite Creator, Supreme Intelligence, all goodness and grace. We are grateful today to be together, to share in the teachings regarding the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 11. We have learned that charity exhibits the characteristics of love, indulgence, patience, benevolence, and forgiveness. However, charity with selfish interests is not complete because there is a motivation or an expectation within the self. Charity is greater than oneself, and faith is an important component.